And that actually doesn't mean like when I say go live, it's not like the red light turns on and we get all serious or anything. This is going to be silly nonsense the entire time. So
That's good.
Zero pressure. I will say, however, multi-cloud architectures, when and why, with Jenn Bergstrom here on vBrownBag. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the live studio audience. Welcome. Come on in, have a seat, grab some coffee, kick back, relax. We're gonna chat about something that is very near and dear to my heart and Damien's and Jenn's, obviously, because she's here talking about it. Multi-cloud architectures. One of the things that we have seen throughout the as cloud has matured, we've seen people talking about having redundancy in one cloud with another cloud. And a lot of the questions that I used to get when I was a consultant was, why would I do this? When is a good use case for it? What is a bad use case for it? And a lot of us have severe battle scars from answering those questions. So when Jenn came on and said, hey, I want to talk about multi-cloud architectures, I was like, oh, game on. Let's get into this. Let's get into the weeds. This is going to be super fun. Jenn, this is your first time on the show. How are you doing? I know that you've got an intro on your deck and everything like that, but this is your first time. So how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation.
It's happy Wednesday to have you on. Yeah, happy Wednesday.
I did not unlock my beer fridge, unfortunately, but
it's okay. It's okay. I'm actually just drinking water today.
That's what I should be drinking.
So before we get into it, join the community, get in on the conversation. If you at vBrownBag, both Damien and I are paying attention on all the social media, Twitter, the YouTube chat channel, the LinkedIn live stream, Threads, and the Twitch live stream. We are watching all of the different things. So if you've got some questions, we would love to hear them from Jenn. We will also be doing our traditional AWS credits giveaway at the end of the show. So feel free to engage us, and we're going to have our little question that we always have at the end. So keep your ears peeled, keep your eyes peeled, pay attention.
Yep.
With that, Damien, how have you been? It's been a minute.
I've been great, actually. I'm about a third of the way through the 100 days of Python, and I'm really, really loving the elegance of Python. You can do an amazing amount of things with a very short number of lines. So yeah, I've just really been enjoying that. I'm still writing PowerShell. I'm still staying busy looking for a job.
Nice.
Just doing all the things. So yeah, I've been doing very well.
So you're a third of the way through. So that means you're just past turtles. You're now importing. Are you on requests yet?
Yes, yeah, just on requests.
Nice.
On the second. I think the lesson I did last night was the Kanye quotes one, which did not age very well. So for those who may not be familiar, you hit a REST API, it comes back with a curated selection of Conway quotes, and the point is just, how do you process JSON? How do you show it in a TK interface, etc. So, yeah, that's what I'm working on, and it's getting good.
Depending on your sense of humor, the Kanye quotes may have aged spectacularly well.
They could have, yes.
Oh, this is going to be a great episode. I can tell already. I'm excited about this. Hey, Stephanie. Oh, Stephanie, you're on Twitch this time. You are so sneaky. Sometimes she's on LinkedIn. Sometimes she's on Twitch. Stephanie's one of our longtime attendees. Nice. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to shut up. Jenn, this is your show. We want to hear more about you, multi-cloud architecture, the whens, the whys, all of the things. Fascinated.
Sure. I'm going to leave it on this definition slide for a little while because I kind of love the low-key Oprah reference on it, but you get a cloud and you get a cloud and you get a cloud. So for everybody on the call or on the show today, I'm Jenn Bergstrom. I'm the Cloud and Data Solutions lead for Parsons, which means that I'm driving our multi-cloud strategy across a quarter of the company. And, we're partnered with multiple different cloud providers. So that means I'm diving in with AWS, Azure, Oracle, GCP, and a little bit of IBM, which, okay, I'm trying not to throw shade, but it honestly makes me chuckle a little bit when you say IBM and cloud together. So we'll just stop there.
You know what? Back when I was a production admin, I remember getting a postcard from IBM announcing their new cloud. And I thought that was very on brand, right? Like, yes, a postcard. Email us back to learn more.
That's fantastic. As long as they didn't have a typo in the email, they were overperforming. All right, so
Spicy.
to set this, oh yeah, sorry, I get punchy in the evenings, and it's definitely
No, this is great. Yes, let's bring it.
So I figured I'd start and kind of set the stage for folks. I assume most people that are on this call probably know what cloud is, but when I'm talking cloud versus not cloud versus, you know, some of the different types, I base it on the definition of cloud as provided by NIST SP 800-145. Not going to go into it, but just if you have any questions about that, feel free to hit me up. There's kind of 5 core things that they use to define what cloud is and what it's not. And, you know, so there's really 3 basic cloud types that are categorized within NIST. They actually have 4, but I moved one of them into a slightly different section because I don't think of it the same way as these 3. 3 cloud types: public, private, and community. Public is the ones that everybody's familiar with: AWS commercial, Microsoft Azure commercial, GCP, OCI, Alibaba, all of those fun ones. Private is cloud environments that are owned privately and limited in accessibility to only the owning organization. I listed an AWS Outpost installed on a remote site and disconnected from the internet because I like to laugh, and you really can't disconnect an Outpost for any period of time from the internet and have it still function. So that's a bad example, but I put it in there anyway. A lot of times you'll talk about a private cloud and it's really not a cloud. We talked about this a little bit before the call started, but you know, cloud-like. And then community clouds are ones that are available to a constrained set of customers via, again, primarily publicly accessible routes. So these would be like Azure GovCloud or Azure for Government, AWS GovCloud, some of the other types of environments out there that are a little more restricted, but still available to subsets of the population. And then the 4th type that NIST actually defines, I have in this category here, and it is the hybrid, I believe is the 4th one that they call out as a cloud type. I don't consider that a cloud type. I consider that an architecture within the clouds. And so I pulled it into a separate page to look at that one. And really the cloud architectures at a high level, hybrid, multi-agnostic, native, and blended. And you know, each of these have different meanings and different uses, and we'll dive into those a little bit more and open the floor for folks to ask questions. But hybrid is one type of cloud connected to another type of cloud. So that would be AWS commercial connected to AWS Outpost on-site, or you know, something along those lines. Multi-cloud is when you do that same type of connection, but you're going across cloud providers. So that would be Microsoft Azure and AWS, and using bits and pieces from each of those, which, as has been mentioned, oftentimes causes battle scars. Agnostic is a cloud architecture that's designed to not care where they're deployed. You know, so you can deploy it on AWS or Azure with minimal changes. And usually that involves containerization and then managing it with something like VMsphere or OpenShift or Wrench or some of the other options out there. And then native are the architectures that are designed to maximize the use of your cloud services. So these ones are the ones that we all really love, like the serverless using SAM on AWS, or you know, any of the ones that are maximizing the use of cloud provided services, managed services, and typically a single cloud provider for that one. And then blended is if you connect cloud and non-cloud resources. So this would be most connections from data center, personal data center, on into Azure or any of the other clouds. You know, the example I put on here is Microsoft Azure connected to ExpressRoute or via ExpressRoute into a data center. So those are kind of the core types of clouds. And since we're being a little bit punchy, I'll go ahead and show this one. So there's a lot of things that like to call themselves cloud, and I like to say that's not actually a cloud because they don't meet the NIST requirements. So all of these guys up here, I'm not going to go too specific about any of them, but they're not really cloud. They're cloud-like.
Screenshot.
I didn't leave that one up for very long, but I understand it as well. So, you know, trying not to throw too much shade, but a little bit is just unavoidable when you're dealing with clouds, right?
We love shade. Are you kidding?
I like shade too, especially in the evenings. All right, so which type of cloud is better and why? That's really what y'all are here for. And, a lot of it, well, here, I'll do this one first. It really does depend. That's the engineer's favorite answer. I'm sure you hear that a lot on this podcast. As a matter of fact, I know you do because I've listened to a few of the other ones. It depends.
It depends show.
Yeah, well, I mean, any engineering show is going to be, right? So what does it depend on for cloud? Well, all the ilities, and then there's a whole bunch of other factors that play into it. And, the ilities are the ones that we all are used to hearing about, right? Securability, reliability, availability, all of the fun ilities that go into cloud that everybody likes to say are the benefits of cloud. And you usually cannot get all of them. You'll notice my lovely little multiple circles Venn diagram there. There's a tiny, tiny little bit in the very center that has everything. And that's kind of a mythical point. That's really like a little null set in the center there. But
that's where Damien lives.
Yes.
That's where customers and clients always want to live until they realize how much it costs to live there. And then they tend to run screaming and end up in, one of the outside edges of the circles where they get a couple of the ilities, but not nearly all of them. But so the ilities drive a lot of the decisions. What are the most important ones for your solution, for what you're building, or for your customer? And then there's the additional factors that, I think probably don't get talked about as often as they should, but especially if you're talking about multi-cloud type of systems, you have to look at things like cost. Once you start bringing multiple clouds into the solution, you tend to end up paying more. It's just kind of reality. Legal and compliance requirements. There can be a lot of additional complexity that gets introduced from a legal and compliance perspective. Things like data sovereignty, where you're storing it, how you're accessing it, how you're filtering it and protecting it. Things like proving that your system is secure. Parsons does a lot of work in the federal space, and so we have to do what's called an ATO process. And that involves proving that our systems are secure and well designed. And the more clouds you add into the picture, the harder that proof gets. Staff knowledge is a huge one that a lot of folks like to forget about when they're trying to make decisions about cloud. If your staff knows AWS really well and you want to deploy things in Azure, may not be the best choice, and vice versa.
Bad day.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of frustration that you probably weren't expecting nor planning for in your schedule and cost assessment. Then availability of existing solutions, that's another big one, right? If there are COTS products out there or open source solutions that largely solve your problem, use those, but their availability and what clouds they work on and where you can actually use them effectively, that's going to impact your decisions. And then your business partnerships and agreements, we all work most of us work for companies, and those companies typically have partnerships and agreements in place, and that can really drive and limit what you're able to actually use when you're building your solutions. And then other is just my catch-all because, you're always going to miss some things and some weird something is going to pop up somewhere where you're like, whoa, I didn't even think about that, but that changes my recommended architecture. So, and really that's all that I had from slides that I wanted to talk about. If we want to kind of walk through some examples or if people want to throw situations out there and we can kind of walk through how you would decide using these factors, what you want to deal with and what you want to use, we can do that. Otherwise, open to whatever.
I feel like we would have an amazing conference after the conference day has finished and we're just sitting at a bar trading war stories and trying to outrage each other with the worst customer story possible, and that we'd be going until like 2 a.m. Oh yeah? Well, what about
Probably. I think if you've been in anything that involves cloud for more than a year or two, you've got some good battle scars that you could bring to light.
I feel like I've been in it for a millennium.
Yeah, me too.
Chris, I think I cut you off, Chris, but I have a question when you finish your thought.
No, go ahead. I was just going to talk about mind maps and Venn diagrams and stuff like that because I want to do like a comparison. But questions away first.
Yeah. So, having worked for companies in the past whose primary business was perpetual on premises software sales, right? There was always an amount of fear, uncertainty, or doubt that was present in all the marketing stuff, right? It was, oh, you don't know how much the cloud costs, which honestly, it's bullshit. Like, everyone publishes their costs. The problem is you don't know how much you're going to rack up when you use it, right? Like, and that it's like, well, that's a you problem. That's not a cloud problem. So I guess, without getting into too much of a tangent here, how would you address some of the kind of top of mind FUD that you've heard about cloud architectures or even multi-cloud architectures?
Yeah, it's a perfectly legit question. So, again, engineering answer, it depends on what the question is specifically or what the FUD is that you're dealing with. Common ones that I hear are data security. How do I know that my data is secure? How do I know that the cloud provider isn't in there poking around and doing whatever they want to with it? And, the response to that one is, for most of the cloud providers now, it's either default encrypted from the outset, or if it's not default encrypted, there's a way to turn on encryption native into the cloud system, right? And they all provide you the ability to manage your own keys, to manage your own rotation of them. You can even doubly, triply encrypt them if you want to, however much security you want to build into that. But that's, one that I've seen people be very concerned with. Another one, the cost one always comes up. And the biggest thing that is a response to that one is good use discipline, right? Good FinOps. I know that's a word that some people love and some people hate, but building in good FinOps practices from the outset of your design and making sure that you've got the monitoring in place as you're building your system out so that you get good clarity, including budget alarms and reserving instances of like savings plans and tagging everything with multiple different layers, usually more than you think you need at the outset. So that then, when you're realizing, oh, I need to slice and dice it this way, you might actually be able to. There's always steps that you can take. One of the hardest challenges that I've dealt with a lot of the customers I work with is they want to go fast, and they believe that cloud makes it super easy to go fast. But these types of solutions, these types of steps that you build into your system so that you know what it's going to cost, so that you know that it's secure, so that you have all of the pieces in place, so that you know that it's scalable and resilient, and you're not going to lose the data. Those things take a little bit more time to put into place and to really build in and prove out in your system. And so, one of the things that I see as a challenge sometimes with a lot of customers is they want to go light speed, and you have to kind of reel them back and say, well, hold on, let's start at Mach 5 first. And, then we'll increase our velocity as we go, but let's slow it down just a little bit so that we can get some of those pieces in place for you, get the landing zone established for you, essentially, so that you have those good practices and don't get caught surprised by any of the FUD concerns.
Yeah, and be ready to go back and redo some work if you realize later on, like, hey, we made some assumptions early on in our design, and that's going to pose some sort of operational or security issues farther down the line. Maybe you got to go back and redo it, right? Like, there's no real shame in that. One piece of FUD that I've heard has been around intellectual property, right? Like, and I think some of it is just kind of feelings, right? Like, for example, one of the world's largest hardware providers that I did a lot of work with in the past sells physical servers. They despise AWS, like, with a passion, and would rather run cloud services on a cardboard box if they have to, right? Like, they just despise it, right? So outside of the things like, a Home Depot or a Lowe's type would hate AWS because they compete in the retail space. Like outside of those kind of, we'll never do business with them kind of emotional decisions, how would you address a concern around intellectual property? Like, is that just an extension of the security concerns with a fancier word on top of it?
I think it at least partly is. Really that kind of comes down to, it's more the client's problem than it is the cloud's problem. Do they have the maturity within their own organization to protect their IP? If they do, they're going to be fine no matter where they're storing that IP. If they don't, they're going to run into issues, again, no matter where they're storing that IP. So, people tend to think that keeping your solutions, your systems, your code on your own on-prem system is more secure. But we all work in hybrid environments now. There's very few companies out there that can get away with making everybody come into one office to do their job every day, especially if they're doing software development, right? You're not going to keep employees if you try to do that to people. So they're connected to the internet. And if you connect anything to the internet, that means there's ways for people that are bad actors to get into it. So, protecting your IP in an on-prem environment that's connected to the internet is oftentimes actually less secure than going into the cloud environment and building it there, because the physical environment is typically less secure in your own versus the cloud data centers. I mean, the security, have you seen, I'm guessing you probably have, but the security that AWS or Microsoft or Google put around their data centers, the actual physical components that they have to that is ridiculous. Like, our military could probably learn a thing from them about how to secure that space. Right? It's impressive, the steps that they put into play there to protect everything. So, you're not going to break into it that way. So if you're using good hygiene on your storage and you're using, good systems and monitoring and tools, you're probably more secure in a cloud environment than you are in your own on-prem, server box in a corner somewhere, in a closet somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
I could see separation of duties being a concern, right? Like if I go on to S3, for an example, and I intentionally open my bucket up to the public, chances are I probably had too much power in that account, right? But like you probably wouldn't be able to easily do that within like a physical data center, right? Because it was like, oh, well, that's the firewall admin, that's the networking folks, right? Like that's the storage person or people, right? But yeah, it's very interesting. I have come to learn that most of the cloud providers, like, it's kind of secure by default in a lot of instances, not all of them, but in a lot of instances, like, you really have to try to make it be insecure. Like, you have to intentionally go past the roadblocks that say stop.
Are you sure you
be
want
careful.
a public bucket? Are you sure you want a public bucket? Are you sure you want a public bucket?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you really, really sure? I know we've asked you 4 times already, but
yeah.
in the background, you get that mental image of the scream saying, "Don't do this."
Yes. Exactly.
I think it's interesting that when we first when we got into this business, there was all of the fun stuff that we were doing from a technical perspective. And then there was compliance and governance. And anytime anybody brought up compliance and governance, everybody immediately glazed over and said, "Oh, do we have to? The server is right here. Why do I need to worry about compliance and governance? I can hug it and it makes me feel safe." And then this cloud thing happened, and that became literally the most important part. Jen, when you said it's more secure in the cloud, 7, 8 years ago, that was a statement that was fraught with outrage. I mean, if you said that in boardrooms 7 years ago, you would be pilloried.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
now you can just say that online. Yeah, it's safer there, because we've had 7 years of watching AWS, the glass man traps where they weigh you to make sure that you haven't brought a USB stick in with you, and all of the crazy stuff that they do. And now we're like, yeah, no company does that. GE's not doing that. Maybe Bell Labs is doing that, but the mom and pop, software gamer developers is not going to be doing that. So of course we're going to put everything in the cloud, because they patch their switches. They take care of all of the load balancer. Denial of service attacks don't exist anymore, because they have these massive pipes that can just literally handle any traffic on the planet without even hiccuping. So the compliance and governance aspect has become so much more important. And yet it's the part that we always just give the short shrift, because it's kind of it's the boring thing. And until it becomes not the boring thing, because you've been compromised and everybody's been, what was it? 10 billion secrets just got released on the darknet from I can't remember what the latest outrage was and who was responsible for it, but it all comes down to compliance and governance. That guy had that S3 bucket. He had too much power, and he accidentally did the thing. And I don't know anything about the thing. I'm just like making up a fictitious construct in my mind. And it all boils down to the boring part. I say that in air quotes because it's not the boring part. It's the most important part. It's just that it wasn't for so long that we call it the boring part now.
Yeah. Well, and people are still very much in the habit of thinking that security is the security organization's problem, right? I'm just a coder. I don't have to worry about that. I just write the software. Well, okay, you maybe could have gotten away with that again in a completely air-gapped, not connected to the internet on-premise environment. Yeah, okay, you could probably get away with writing insecure code. But as soon as you start connecting anything to anything else, you have potential ingress points and potential breach points, and everybody should be thinking about security and thinking about compliance and protecting their systems. But it's a massive cultural change to get everybody across the organization to really legitimately think about that. And I like to say, and I'm sure you've heard this before from many others as well, but tech is easy, people are hard. Getting people to make that cultural change and actually adapt and accept and understand how important it is, that's the hard part. That's really the heavy lift.
You can't just turn people off and back on again.
Right. Right.
That is literally my life right now. Tech is easy. People are hard. That's honestly why I was such a good consultant, because I have a psychology degree, so I was able to get people in their little get along t-shirts and work with each other better to solve the easy tech problem that was made hard because people were having political pissing matches or whatever. Yeah. Do you have a mind map that you go to? So like when I was in your shoes, I created like several mind maps of like contingencies, like taking all of these things into consideration. And then I would walk people through and drill down into the various aspects of the things. Do you create stuff like that? Or what's your take on those kinds of things when you're thinking about stuff like this?
Well, so my mind works a little uniquely, I think, in that it is a great big massive spaghetti, and so everything is connected to everything else, and it all just kind of mushes together. But
nice.
The reason I went back to this all the ilities slide is because this is kind of one of the things that is my go-to when I'm talking to people that want to put something into the cloud. Is first and foremost, what ilities do you really care about? And why, and actually make them justify why they want it. Because, when you go into a conversation with folks that don't really understand cloud necessarily, they're always going to say, well, I want all of them, right? Again, they're looking for that little teeny triangle in the very center of the Venn diagram. And then you have to kind of start walking them back. Okay, well, what about recoverability do you really want, right? What is your essential data that you have to be able to get back to? What is what are your actual SLAs that you have to worry about? Do you really need 99, do you really need 12 nines of availability? Reality check, most of the applications and systems out there, they don't need 12 nines of availability.
Right.
So, if you're trying to design your system to meet that criteria and you're putting that as your core ility, you're probably focused on the wrong thing, realistically. So, that's one of my starting points is really just diving into all of these ilities and making them walk through them and think through them and really kind of rack and stack and prioritize which ones they want most of all. Once you get through all the ilities, usually, again, because tech is easy overall, a lot of the decision is kind of made for you at that point. You can kind of present a couple of good options to them that meet the ilities that they care about. And then from that point on, whichever option they pick doesn't really matter that much in the scheme of things because it's going to get their core requirements.
Yep. And that's also a direct driver of the cost as well, right? Like, if you think about availability, a single virtual machine in one cloud data center versus something that's geographically redundant, right? Total difference, And if you're doing that on premises, it's like an order of magnitude, at least in cost, right? Like, or if you think about availability in terms of the nines, just adding a 9 adds so much more money, right? Like there's a big jump between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's pretty crazy. Yeah. Yeah, so I think a lot of these things, like if you were to somehow like pull scalability out to accentuate that, it's going to pull the other ones along with it, right? It's going to have its own implications based on maintainability or usability or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these, go together pretty well, where you can go for availability and scalability and reliability and kind of tie those three together pretty well, and they usually cooperate pretty nicely without adding a lot of complexity or cost to get all three of them as a package deal. But once you start throwing in interoperability, where now you can take this system that you've designed to be scalable, highly available, and reliable, and now you want to pull it out of, maybe you designed it for AWS first, right? And you want to pull it out of there and now deploy it into Azure as well, or into an on-prem environment. Well, now all of a sudden you've immensely impacted the cost and the complexity of the design that you have to do. Because now, instead of being able to go cloud native, which is what you usually would default to if you really, really want great availability, scalability, and reliability, now you have to look at other options, right? So
Right.
What am I looking at now? What is that workload going to be for our employees? What is that, backlog going to look like? And how did it just change? Because I said, wait, I really want interoperability. So the combination of them, I guess that's where my mind map kind of comes into play on it, is exactly that push and pull of which ilities you're emphasizing and which ones are really driving your core expectations for the system.
And is everybody on the same page on their side? And does that shift as you go up and down the chain? Because that never happens.
No, never.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the overlay that goes on all of these is cost, right? Because you may have people that are very, very hard set all the way up the chain on interoperability until you show them the cost factor of it. And then you start getting the scaffolds out and, oh, well, what can we cut and still kind of have that? How can we approximate interoperability without actually paying that much? So, then it starts getting fun when you start slicing and dicing.
Awesome. Okay. Damien, do you see any? I'm scouring the Twitter sphere and making sure that we've covered any questions that popped up, and I'm not seeing anything else. Do you see anything else?
No, I haven't.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
If you have more, feel free though. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Me? No. This has been a fascinating talk. I haven't had an honest to goodness like cloud talk in a while, right? It's always been someone's cloud or someone's idea of cloud, or how can we convince our customers to keep buying our perpetual software and not take our money to someone else, right? Like it's usually like the golden handcuffs discussion, right? Mm-hmm. It's always a terrible thing unless you're the one selling the handcuffs, right? and then it's handcuffs are great, right? So yeah, I haven't had a talk like this in a while. So thank you very much, Jen. This has been fascinating.
You're welcome.
It's definitely refreshing. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say golden handcuffs are interesting too, because they usually come with really nice padding on the inside, but that padding wears off awfully fast.
Yes.
The handcuffs.
Yep. And it's super refreshing to chat with somebody that really, I mean, we all vastly overuse it depends, but it's something that we truly need to internalize, because it really does matter, like who you're talking to and the different types of. So I hate bringing this up, but I'm the open framework architecture certified, TOGAF certified, and a lot of that certification is balancing the risk and reward considerations of all of your different stakeholders, requirements, risks, assumptions, and constraints, and then taking all of those things and mapping them into a design structure that you have your requirements, you have your risks, you have your assumptions, and you have your constraints, and those things basically build out what your architecture is going to look like, because cost is a thing. All of the ilities are a thing, and that's this kind of talk makes me realize I'm not crazy, and so for that I appreciate you.
Well, good. That feels successful to me. If I have one positive impact on you at all. Yeah, I mean, I listed these additional factors out as a separate slide when I was putting this presentation together because they have as much of an impact on what your end result is going to be as any of the ilities, right? And sometimes more of an impact because, staff knowledge as one example, we've mentioned that a couple of times, right? If you have staff that's well-trained in AWS and you turn around and tell them, hey, we're putting everything in Oracle Cloud, they're going to look at you like you've grown 3 heads and done a goofy Scottish dance off the stage. And, then they're going to turn and run the other direction. It's not going to be well received, right? And the burden that you have on that extra cost, that's one of those risks that I oftentimes have to ask when I'm dealing with individuals that are moving things into cloud or companies that are moving things into cloud is, are you considering that human impact and how this is actually going to work in your environment and with your teams? And, it's shocking to me how many companies don't think about that or think about it last. And, the reality is, if you don't have your employees, your team's buy-in on the solution you're proposing, you have about a 96% chance that it's going to fail.
Yep.
But if you get their support and their buy-in on it, then you have, about a 96% chance that it's going to succeed. The people make all the difference. And whether they're able to do it, whether you've given them the tools and the framework that they need to be able to implement whatever you're saying needs to be implemented or not, is, deciding whether you're shooting yourself in the foot or giving yourself a really, really nice, Corvette to drive around in as you're building it. That analogy fell apart, but I think you get what I'm saying, right? It's whether you're giving yourself the ability to succeed or the ability to get run over and fail miserably.
Yep.
So all of these ones, if you look at them, other than cost at the top and maybe legal and compliance, all of the other ones deal with people more than anything else.
Honestly, one of the very first questions back when I was consulting, one of the very first questions that I had whenever I was engaged on a project or brought in to help put the fire out in the dumpster that was the project, I would go around and find out where the buy-in was missing. Do we have executive buy-in? Do we have C-suite buy-in? Do we have director level buy-in? Where is it missing? Because that's the reason why this dumpster is on fire right now, because not everybody's at the same table. Once you figure that out, then you can and get everybody on the same table and on the same page, then you can actually start fixing things. So this is hitting all. I mean, I don't have questions because I lived this for so long.
Yeah.
Well, it ties back to those common battle scars that you mentioned at the start of this.
Yes.
I can't wait. We're gonna figure out which conferences you're going to, and we're gonna hang. We're definitely gonna be hanging out, Jen.
That would be good. I would enjoy that. I'm gonna be at reInvent. That's kind of my next big conference.
Done. All right. I will. We are gonna take some time out to find a quiet corner in the Venetian somewhere and chat about all the things.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, Jen, thanks for coming on. Super appreciate it. We appreciate you coming on. We know it's late at night, so this isn't the most ideal time for a podcast, but we will can this and edit it and trim it down and publish this in a little while. But thank you so much for coming on, and we really appreciate you.
Hey, Chris, do we have a giveaway or?
We do, and we had up to 11. So I've been keeping an eye on the counter, and we've had up to 11 people previously. But as of right now, the only person on the stream is Stephanie. So I know her, so I'm just going to ping her on LinkedIn and just give her the credits. So Stephanie, congratulations, you've won the random prize. The random prize for tenacity.
Yes. The range was Stephanie to Stephanie. So there we go.
Yeah. Nice. You can't win again, Damien. You're a host now. You're not allowed to win.
I don't think I've ever won. I mean, I always win, but I don't think I've ever won this giveaway.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and end the stream now. Jen, feel free to hang on afterwards, and we'll have a little chat and tie things up. And everybody else, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Bye.